Hello everybody, my name is Walnut, and today we are doing another SC2 cast. Today, we have a PvZ on the map, Expedition Lost? I vetoed this map a long time ago because I hate playing against Terran on it. Either way, we have, up in the top right hand position, our Protoss player, FRAZZAbrasil. And down in the bottom left-hand position, we have our red Zerg player, SlavaSlave. Pretty sick name. Probably just going to be referring to these people as Protoss and Zerg, as that's what I do normally. Anyway, it looks like the Protoss player is looking to go for a gateway expand with the pylon on the high ground here. This is indicative of a gateway, then a cyber, and then a nexus, that sort of thing. Or a gateway nexus cyber. All sorts of variations of that. This is a gold level game, by the way, on reddit.com/r/castit. Wonderful site for finding games, wonderful subreddit for finding games to play. Absolutely amazing. We will see a pool first at 13 for our Zerg player here, and he will move a drone out potentially to take a base. It's a little bit early for that though. We will see the gateway first out of our Protoss player, and I'm interested to see what the gas timings will be, or potentially what the Nexus timing will be, as not particularly sure on either. Now the interesting thing about gold level games is that you never know what's going to happen, because gold players don't necessarily use build orders as well as everyone else does. They don't necessarily play the game as efficiently as some of the higher level players, but that adds to the unpredictability and also to the enjoyment of the match. We do see the complete wall off opting to go for the cyber core before Nexus, and then we do see the hatch going down for our red Zerg player. There's a probe here, and I'm wondering what it's going to be doing. Is it going to be throwing down a pylon? Are we going to see proxy DTs, or are we going to see like dumb proxy robo? You never know what's going to happen in gold level games. I've seen weird like 4 base baneling busts that you'd never expect to work just be absolutely immaculate, that sort of thing. Now we do see our second gas here from our Protoss player, and again, I'm quite confused as to what he's doing. There's a gnat on my freaking pop filter. Get off of there. Freaking gnats, man. Freaking gnats. Anyway, Protoss player opting not to go for any sort of early expansion. If the Zerg has scouted this, which he potentially has, but also sort of hasn't, he will know that this is some sort of one base weird thing, but this could also just be a symptom of Gold League, where players aren't necessarily playing as efficiently as they could be. We see a couple of Zerglings moving out looking for any sort of proxies, and this probe is going to be a bit more sad than it's ever been in its whole life. As it is found, its patrol path will keep it safe for a little bit because these Zerglings don't have speed, but it will eventually get taken down. Poor little probie. Mothership core about to pop out for a Protoss player, just playing exceptionally safe here. He's got 3 gateways, and I'm curious as to what tech he'll throw down next, because that will decide the rest of the pace of this game. Zergling speed going down, so it looks like our Zerg player wants to apply a little bit of pressure, but he's going to have a very hard time doing that against the no nexus of our Protoss player. I'm assuming this is some sort of one base all-in type thing. I'm not particularly sure. Again, I don't know this build at all, but Zerg player going relatively standard here, getting a Roach Warren at a pretty okay time. Looks like he is going to do some sort of 2 base timing, potentially a 3 base timing, but it looks like a 2 base timing considering there is no 3rd base taken yet, and we are nearing the 6-minute 30-second mark. Ton of overlords actually on the way. Looks like a small supply block and a small overreaction. Again, as I talked about in the last video, one of the big differences between diamond players and players below that is the ability to spend money efficiently. And as we see from both players here, neither of them are quite spending their money efficiently. I'd say the Zerg player has a bit of an advantage in that sense, but at the same time, I think that our Protoss player is going to be a little bit ahead in terms of unit count, simply because he's got technically higher production. He's on 3 gateways on 1 base as opposed to 2 hatcheries. I guess it all depends on how consistent the larva injects are, but you know, it's whatever. Probes are being pulled here to build a nexus at the 7:30 mark. I'm actually at a loss. It's whatever though. Plenty of sentries on the field. No tech structures thrown down quite yet. I'm curious as to what he's going to be going for, because that will decide the rest of the pace of this game. Sad little probe getting stuck behind the Zealot there. Needs to move that, unhold position the Zealot. More Zerglings with speed now, doing a lot of scouting out on the map, keeping a lot of map control, starting to pop a bunch of roaches now, and it looks like he wants to go for some sort of timing. The Protoss is just taking his 2nd base right now, so this would be a pretty sick timing to hit with 9-ish roaches and a handful of speedlings. There is no wall, there's no forge. The production is not quite kicking in yet, as the 3 extra gateways, excuse me, have just started. There are a bunch of force fields though. That is upwards of like 12 force fields. So I foresee a very hard time of these roaches getting up the ramp, but this is Gold League, man. Anything can happen. We could see like a 2-base Bane bust, anything. But it looks like no, I'm actually wrong on all counts, because the 3rd base has just gone down at the 9-minute mark. Looks like the Zerg player is going to play a lot more defensive, a lot more of a macro game, just trying to get map control with a large amount of units. We see the Protoss player moving out with a pretty big contingent of sentries, backed up by a handful of stalkers and a zealot. Now, this army can potentially trade with this amount of roaches as long as he cuts the roaches off properly. But if he doesn't cut the roaches off properly, it's going to be a very hard fight for him. It's going to be a large uphill battle, and he is not going to have a very good time against that. Now, this is an interesting spot to engage in because it's so wide that it's very hard to get a force field wall. Actually hallucinates a couple of Colossus. Interesting move considering he doesn't actually have a robo. Maybe looking to trick the Zerg into focus firing something that isn't real. But he's not moving in yet. He's wasting the duration on these and thus wasting the energy. And the Zerg player is making a move towards the Protoss's main base. And he is nowhere near this. The Mothership Core is presumably back at home. Yes, the Mothership Core is back at home. All of the resources are being spent over here. More Colossus being hallucinated. Roaches do start to kill the rocks. But we see our Protoss player moving into the 3rd base of the Zerg. Zerg starts to move backwards and is looking to defend this position, but he is going to be a little bit late to the party. Looking to cut off the Protoss player's escape path. Protoss move commanding into the roaches. Bad times ahead. Stalkers are able to trade relatively well with the roaches. Force fields are not very good if you're not actually preventing anything from shooting. Hydras come in from the side, start to get a nice little surround on the units, but the Stalkers and the Sentries traded a bit too well with the Roaches, so the Zerg player is forced to back up. Now, those force fields were a large waste of energy, I feel like. Force fielding units that are already on top of your army doesn't do anything, especially if you don't run away, because the power of force fields is it cuts off part of the army from shooting. If you're not cutting off anything from shooting, then you're not accomplishing anything. And he waited a very long time to get things like Guardian Shield up. Actually hallucinates a Colossus directly on top of that army now. Alright, big engagement about to happen. Lots of Hydras, lots of Roaches, lots of Queens. Couple of Stalkers taking damage now. Focus fire on the Colossus that is hallucinated. That is going to fall. Force fields were not quite good enough, so these Protoss player, is forced to back up. A few Stalkers being picked off with the corner snipe, but everything else should get out just fine. There is no speed on the Roaches, there is no speed on the Hydras, so these units are going to have a very hard time keeping up with the speedy Protoss army. 3rd base being replaced down again by a Zerg player, and an infestation pit as well. I'm assuming he's going to be going into something along the lines of Ultralisks or Vipers. I don't know if Broodlords... Okay, 4th base going down, so he is looking for a lot of macro here. Double upgrades going down as well. He is playing the long con. In the same vein, our Protoss player throwing down a Twilight Council and a Forge. This is indicative of a sort of blink timing, though it is a little bit late. He is definitely going to be getting blink with that amount of stalkers, but the upgrade is going to be... I don't know. If it's... Okay, it is attack, so he is going into more stalkers. If it's armor, it means he's transitioning into a more zealot-based Colossus composition. And if it's attack, it's generally into more blink stalkers. We see a 5th base going down for our Zerg player. You gotta be kidding me. He's only got 44 drones to the 50 probes of the Protoss player, so I'm not sure he can even saturate all these bases he's taking right now. We actually don't even see blink started. It is going to be a dark shrine out of the Protoss player. If we look at the bases, there is no detection at any of these bases. If we check the units tab again, there's not even an overseer. There's no detection on the map for these DTs, so this could be the play. This could be exactly what our Protoss player has needed to get in, or excuse me, back into this game from the slightly disadvantageous position he's in. He's behind in the army tech, he's behind slightly in the army supply, and he is also behind in economy. Now, the Zerg player can be punished pretty heavily with this, and DTs is one of the best way to punish a greedy player with no detection. But, at the same time, if this goes unpunished, if the DTs are dealt with in a very nice fashion, then the Protoss player is going to find himself extremely behind because he will not be able to keep up in the economy. It all also depends on how many drones the Zerg player adds on, because currently his main base is not quite mined out, his natural is not mined out, his 3rd base isn't mined out, and his 3rd base isn't even saturated yet. So, he's got another 2 bases to saturate, and he's not making drones yet. He is starting to add on essential upgrades. He's got his +2 weapons and armor. He's got Hydra's speed on the way, almost finishing up, and it will be Vipers as the tech of choice. Vipers are going to fare very well against Blink Stalkers with the Blinding Clouds, as Blinding Cloud renders Stalkers essentially useless. 3 DTs moving out across the map now. I wonder if they are all going to the same place, or if they are being split up between bases. Excuse me, DT's already in the bases here, assaulting the 3rd base, the natural, and the main base all at the same time. Overseer's morphing in, but it's going to be a little while before they get to the other bases. 3rd base is going to fall in the meantime. 4th/5th base as well going to fall, and it looks like our Protoss player has found his way directly back into this game. Has caught up in the army supply, has well, he's actually far ahead in the income right now. And he also, I don't know, man, he's just in a really good spot. These DTs being nearly uncontested in their dominance of the map. Lots of probes and such being made for our Protoss player, trying to catch up in the economy and also keep even in the army supply, which he's been doing so far, which has been working relatively well. It's important to note that the Zerg player is still actually on 3 bases because of his greedy 4th and 5th bases. We see Archons being added on by our Protoss player, and his army is looking very scary. Now, I want to remind you that gateway units are not actually that good, so while this ball may look very scary, there's not actually a whole lot of meat to this army. Stalkers do an okay amount of damage, Zealots do an okay amount of damage, but this army is something you'd see around the mid-game, like somewhere around the 12-minute mark, where you just have a lot of Stalkers, a lot of Sentries, and a handful of Zealots, and then you throw those into the Zerg ball, and you try and trade as best you can with Force Fields and Blink Stalkers. Now, this army is still pretty viable, though, with the amount of Archons in it, but I am pretty worried as to how it will trade against the army of the Zerg player, who is better in upgrades right now, has a slightly higher army supply, has the capability for a lot better of a concave. It all depends on the force fields and where the Protoss player chooses to engage the Zerg. Now, they are looking at this spot right here as a point of contention. Both players moving into this ramp area. This is one of the biggest ramps in the game. This could be a huge engagement here. Protoss player does not want to move up into the high ground quite yet, as there is a huge concave set up by the Zerg. He has four Vipers here, all with plenty of energies for blinding clouds. We see again the hallucinated Colossus play. This is very interesting. This is very good to bait out the abducts. Oh, one of the Vipers getting picked off immediately by the Blink Stalkers. Huge abduct on the Archons here. Pretty good force field zoning out a couple of the Roaches, but not the whole army engaging at once. That abduct pretty good on the Archon, but it hasn't been focused down. Alright, it goes down now. Very good force fields out of the Protoss player, zoning out a lot of the Hydras in the back. A couple more good abducts on Archons, bringing them into the Hydra line, and they're able to be picked off pretty quickly. But the Stalkers are still left over, and there's not a whole lot of meat left over in the army for the Zerg player. All of the Roaches are gone. The majority of the Hydras are gone. He has a few Vipers left. Can get a bit more energy on those, but it's only Lings in production right now. There's a couple of Roaches, but it's mainly Lings, and I don't see Lings trading with these Stalkers right now. On top of that, the Protoss player also has DTs mixed in with the army. There is not really an overseer. There is one overseer on the map that is going to be picked off extremely quickly, and I'm actually really surprised by how well that fight went for the Protoss player. In all honesty, the abducts for the Zerg probably helped out the Protoss player a little bit more, because he abducted during the engagement, so the Archons got extremely good splash damage on the Zerg forces. I would have rather liked to see blinding clouds all over the Protoss army, because that means it does essentially the same thing as a force field, where it makes it so all of the units in the back are kind of useless. All the units in the front have to move forward a lot, and it's all around just a very good spell. Utilization of that would be very, very good. We actually see Immortal production out of our Protoss player. This is fairly smart because of the high Roach numbers he has seen so far, but also with the high Zergling numbers, we could see the Immortals shooting the wrong units and not necessarily getting a whole lot of work done. Now, the Zerg player is making like 15 Hydralisks right now that just popped, and he still has 3 of the Vipers, all with full energy now. So he is still in this game. He's got a very good chance to win this, to trade very well with this army, because this army is not entirely good at dealing with Ling Hydra. He's got no splash damage, no AoE, nothing like that. And there is a very good flank here with the Zerglings. Zerglings get on top of the sentries. Guardian Shield goes down, but the Hydras are already on top of the whole army. Blink Stalkers are being killed off, and this is a full 270-degree surround, essentially. There's nothing the Protoss player can do. All he can do is warp in a couple of units at home. He actually has a fairly large army, but it is nowhere near the Zerg's army. It is half the army supply. And unless he gets some sort of miracle engagement where the Zerg player move commands, he is going to lose this game. 4th base for the Protoss has been up for a little while in mining, but it looks like this is going to be the next point of contention. It looks like this base is going to be picked off relatively soon, with the scary Zerg ball scooting up. Actually, Blink is only now finishing up in research. A big blunder by the Protoss player, as he could have had this upgrade for previous fights. 2 time warps will go down from the Mothership Core, potentially. That is a very good time warp. Archons are getting on top of the Roaches. They're able to do a lot of damage. Blink has finished up, so he should be able to Blink Micro here. Immortals pumping out a lot of damage, but there's just not quite enough Protoss here. Blink Stalkers are not very good when not backed up by a couple of other units. They don't have any sentries for the force fields, can't zone out any of the army, and the concave was just so good for the Zerg player. Able to trade the Roach Hydra with superior upgrades with the Protoss army, and I'm just surprised, man. Like, I feel like the Protoss player was in such a good position. A lot of DTs about to be picked off here. There is an Overseer with the army, so they will be found out, picked off. Sad boys. DT's moving now into the main base, but it looks like our Zerg player has a grasp on where these are. Trying to get away, but there's Overseers everywhere. Spore Crawlers, Spines. Actually, there's a lot of idle drones here as well. Needs to maybe get these doing other stuff. DT is trying to attack the hatchery, but we have drones holding the line, making sure these DTs can't really touch the hatchery in optimal places. DTs getting picked off before they can pick off the hatchery. Lots of base defense at this 4th base, so that is not going to be touched for a very long time. We have 4 Vipers just sitting randomly in the middle of the map, and I'm scared for the Protoss player right now. He has half the army supply of his opponent, and it's mainly gateway units. He's got a couple of Immortals to help alleviate some of it, but he's got no sentries, no archons, no colossus, so he's going to have a very hard time trading against the roach hydra that his opponent has. Does blink directly on top of the hydras. That was a very bad blink. This allows all the hydras in the composition to fire, which is exactly the opposite of what you want. And with that army going down, the Protoss player realizes that there is not a whole lot left for him, taps out, and gives the Zerg player the win. Both players playing very well. Again, big shout out to reddit.com/r/castit for the absolutely wonderful replays here. Be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, as I will be uploading content a lot more now that I have my new mic. And follow me on Twitch at twitch.tv/Anthony356. That will be in the description. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the cast. And as always, be sure to leave your feedback in the comments section. I only wish to get better, so I'd like to hear what you guys have to say about my casting. Thank you guys, and see you in the next video.